I have been trying to get to the bottom of this one for a long time. This is an attempt. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has determined there are 574 Indian tribes in the United States today. They still call them Indians, still called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Bureau only concerns itself with the United States, so let's imagine there are another 500, let's say, or 250, I don't mind, in South America and Canada. So that's a total of about 750 tribes in what are now two continents and 15 nations total. There are over 1,000 indigenous languages spoken today in the Americas by the Indians. In 1491, you could walk from Maine to California and be taken in and fed every night. A shared tradition of hospitality, kindness to strangers was everywhere before Christianity. Rory Stewart walked 18 months across Iran, Pakistan, and the Himalayas in 2001, and ending with a solo saunter across Afghanistan in 2002. He was taken in by villagers every night to sleep and eat. Tradition. Islam. Arab. The pyramids of Egypt were not built by slaves. The Persian Empire had no slaves. Zoroastrianism forbid the owning of slaves. The Portuguese had a roaring slave trade with the Japanese from first contact in 1543 until Toyotomi Hideyoshi, great unifier of Japan, told the Jesuits to tell the Portuguese to stop in 1595. He was a slave owner himself, but he didn't like the Japanese being bought and sold. His slaves were only Koreans. The Jesuits coined the classic excuse, quote, "We buy Japanese slaves because the Japanese sell them," end quote. One of the great wheezes of the Western civilization that has kept them in good stead ever since. We apply the same logic to the drug war. I am rambling with intent. There seems to be a notion that slaves are bought, used, and sold out of some kind of personal depravity. Are bought, let's not kid ourselves. It was abolished, but never essentially stopped. It is a depraved act to own another person, but I'd say no more depraved than the desire to do so. Thomas Jefferson thought it was sinful to own slaves, but okay to think Africans were inferior human beings like Lincoln. It is not so much that I don't find these much admired men not admirable. I do not find them admirable, but mostly because I find them cowardly, therefore. And there will be, therefore, more. There are so many better persons in history, but they are quieter. Bigotry is a big vote getter. In societies and their structures in every corner of the planet for a long, long time, slaves have been a thing. But then in some places, they haven't. It is not a study of progress either. It is a study of societal consensus that one person, under certain circumstances, can possess another, and the possessed will work, sing, teach, have sex at the possessor's bidding. Sounds like several orthodoxies we live with. I visited the Shoal Creek Mill Museum 10 years ago, just outside Kansas City. We visited with a guide who told us how it worked. The mill was built around a community, housing for the workers. The museum is advertised as a celebration of 19th century industrial America. The guide was not celebrating that day, however. The working conditions were appalling, he said. The machinery ran all day. Children were employed as they earned very little and were little, less likely to get hooked and mangled by the machinery, which happened often, which could not be turned off as the mill was powered by the Shoal Creek. The temperature in the room was kept at least 90 degrees, as this melted the natural oil in the wool while it was processed. The machines were second-hand, shipped from factories around Lowell, Massachusetts, who got the latest stuff from Europe and needed to get rid of the old. The machines were sold with their operators. The company housing was close by. So the workforce was always there. The wages were very low. There was the company stove, so you know. Nearby on the estate was the house of the owner, 2 stories, its broad porches, lovely for him and his family and his horses. So I wonder how that was or is to whom this appealed, this division of the species into the owners and the owned, and how this imaginative division is alive and well today. The diner who expects service in obsequious silence from the waiter, the boss whose salary is regulated by how many people are under him. How much of this is attached to our sense of success? It must be there. We have so many ancient rituals of tugging the forelock, tipping the cap, extant that attach to the rich and powerful, the aspirers to wealth and power and their lesser servants. And how solid is this acculturation that the forelock tuggers tolerate it? The Downton Abbey of it all, the most popular British TV show in America ever. I am really asking, it is a meme. Earn more than your friends. I recall the great story of the architect going on site and being ignored by the manual laborers, the builders, who were outside in the cold building the bridge. It was explained by the foreman to the poor conscientious fellow who was disturbed by this sullen reception. They had been working hard all day and are resentful. That to me is a case of unconscious body language, the superior fellow not able to, what, condescend? Don't be hurt, try harder. I have worked on film sets. On one once I was doing a crossword with a producer, New York Times crossword. I solved a couple of the thornier ones, pure luck, then touched his shoulder and in some jest. He said, "Don't touch me." In Where Angels Fear to Tread, Judy Davis shrieks at the Italians in the piazza, "Don't touch me, I'm English." Yes, the producers of the world, the English. It is so set in stone because we have made it so. It is an impulse apparently to be superior to. Perhaps it grows out of a culture and education that expresses its highest values in humiliation. Have you not had those conversations? How far is our culture really from Versailles? Whatever is hazing about except some ghoulish paying it forward? Who gets off on it sexually? What is power? What does it mean? And if you have it, don't you want it? If you do have it, do you want more? Or if you really have it, it means nothing to you, but you will then be assailed by all the niceties, the rights, the behaviors. Someone will call you sir. Oi. And I wonder about the caste system in India. It's fascinating when you read it because each position, each rung has its dignity, has its religious function, I suppose. And so it's not to be judged quite the way one might, but it points to something that seems entirely universal. India that has codified it. The West denies it, but applies it all the time, is obsessed with it. And I don't really know. It's so backward. It's so encumbering. It permeates everything. And the strangest thing is we feel like we have to justify it. And I can't help but feeling, one of the reasons we don't have mechanisms that would stop the very, very rich men who dominate more and more our lives. One of the reasons why we don't have a tax code that would leave them with only $1 billion a year, poor dears, or something like that, and make much better use of the money. One of the reasons we don't have that is that we all secretly, or maybe not so secretly, want what they have. In other words, that thing of having power. If you have power in that, if you like, Asian sense of power, you don't need it. You don't want the Shakespeare sense of want. When Shakespeare said want, he means that you lack it. So you want something because you lack it. You lack power. So you have in this society a whole structure based on these children. And I suggest that one of the ways to change that is to stop being children yourselves, right? Stop buying into the story that the children wrote and continue to write. Poor old David Brooks is so disappointed because he feels now because of Trump that America is not a force for good in the world. Why ever did you need that to be true? What is wrong with you that you needed that to be true? Because being good in the world, a force for good in the world, means that you're better than something. And the world has been persecuted by that attitude for at least 500 years. At least, probably longer. It's just a really bad place to start, and it's going to be a worse place to end.